Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's Approaching the Scene. I thought I'd do something a little different this week. I planned to do something totally different, but news of the Italian volcano Stromboli having a massive eruption caught my eye, and I thought I would talk a little bit about my photographic experience at that mountain. I had a really epic photo adventure there, and I was actually kind of planning a workshop to go back probably in 2021, and I still may do that if I can get enough takers. I'll query you at the end of this. But you know, it's an amazing place to photograph. It's an epic adventure. It's it's in Italy. It's right off the coast of Sicily. It's this beautiful volcano that comes up out of the ocean, just rises about 1,000 meters, about 3,000 feet above the surface, just off the coast of Sicily. The way I went to it was on a hydrofoil from Naples. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that adventure, talk about photographing the volcano, just kind of go a little behind the scenes, photographing one of the Earth's most active volcanoes in the wake of it having a massive eruption that killed, sadly, at least one hiker last week, and have had to evacuate a lot of folks. It was a pretty big eruption, and it's a place that I was seriously considering going back to in 2021, and maybe inviting an active group of workshop participants. Maybe make it just a kind of an add-on to a Italian workshop. But anyhow, so we'll talk about that at the end. I'll take a couple questions at the end. Anyhow, Stromboli is a really spectacular place, not just because really active volcanoes that erupt super frequently are known as Strombolian, and there's this volcano that you can go and it goes off like clockwork, generally without being dangerous. I mean, any volcano is dangerous, but generally it's something that you can go up, and every 15 minutes or so it kind of goes off with this neat explosive force. And we'll talk about how you get up there and how you photograph it. But it's also a beautiful fishing village that's nestled in on the shore of the island, and it's a really gorgeous Italian island, and great food, little streets, all that kind of Italian charm. So I was really shocked to see this last week that there was a massive eruption, a big ejection of ash and debris and lava flowing down the sides. And if you take a look at some of the more impressive images, I don't have high-res versions of this, but I saw that tourists were actually diving into the sea in panic. This is from another island nearby. You definitely wouldn't want to be up near the top. I mean, I've photographed the caldera with lava bubbling in it with a 50mm lens. I don't think I want to be there as that was happening. And the accounts I read, it happened late in the afternoon, just as people were getting ready to start hiking up for sunset. So thankfully, it didn't happen while a big group of people was up there. Every evening, people go up. So let's jump back. I'll talk about my trip to Stromboli. It was in 2015, and I went to Europe for a good friend, my friend Duncan's wedding. Met up with some great photographers at that wedding who are still friends of mine, and we took off. Actually, Stacey and I went to Turkey. The wedding was in Greece, in Thessaloniki, but we went to Turkey first, then went to Greece for the wedding and had a really wonderful time in Thessaloniki and on the island of Mykonos. And then we jumped over to Italy, and we did the Amalfi Coast and had a spectacular trip through the southern coast of Italy, and took a hydrofoil from Naples over to Stromboli. So here you are arriving at this volcano that comes up just off the coast of Sicily. And it's just this really quaint fishing village that you land in. There's a little bit more of a town to it, but the spot that you land with the docks is this neat little fishing fleet that they beach at low tide. There's great food, just a really charming harbor. There's a cool lighthouse at dawn the next morning. We had some nice pink in the sky, and there's a neat lighthouse on a rock just off the coast. It's got that kind of island charm to it. But rising up above it is this smoking volcano. You know, that's not cloud, that's steam from the volcano. There's a really beautiful little town center, you know, the typical Italian cathedral and these narrow little streets. There's only really three-wheeled cart cars and scooters that are out on the streets, and there's bougainvillea. It's actually, for anyone that remembers the film El Postino, I believe El Postino may have won the best foreign language film at the Oscars quite a long time ago. Beautiful little film set on Stromboli in the village. And at about, you know, a few hours before sunset, people assemble at these little outfitters areas, and you can rent hiking boots and walking sticks and helmets, and you go up with guides and you hike up this pumice volcanic trail. And along the way, you get a view down over the city and the harbor and that lighthouse out there. You can see it's kind of a switchback trail up through pumice. It reminds me a little bit of hiking around Mammoth Lakes, California, for any of you who've done some of that Eastern Sierra volcanic pumicey hiking. It's dusty but soft on the feet with all these light rocks that float in water. You know, it's just super volcanic and fun. We had actually just found out on this trip that we were pregnant with our little boy Pike, and Stacey was just a rock star considering she was sort of fighting morning sickness and hiking up this crazy volcano. We hadn't even had a chance to get home and talk to the doctors about it or get an ultrasound, but it was a really exciting time for the two of us because our first baby was on the way and turned into my boy Pike. So on the way up, we saw paragliders out photographing the volcano. We had a really nice group of folks we hiked up with, and then we got our first view, and it was just consistently steaming with these little eruptions. You'd have this constant bunch of steam coming out. We got up just in time for the sunset, and you actually hike up to a ridge above the most active caldera with the Mediterranean Sea stretching out below here. And you can see there's this steam boiling out of the mouth, but then occasionally there's these smoky eruptions. As the sun set, it was just beautiful. I did this panorama up there. Luckily, there was a little eruption right as the sun went into that haze on the horizon. It was a lot hazier day than I might have hoped for, but you know, you deal with what you got when you get up there. And then, you know, we got to where we were really close, right above the caldera, and this is shot with 50 millimeters. So yeah, pretty much from here on out, I'm just shooting with 50 millimeters. We were very close. And, you know, the first thing I do is kind of range in on, you know, what's the exposure that I want. You know, here I'm at, I think I can check that out. Yeah, there we go. 20th of a second at f8, ISO 64. It's a little dark, but you can see there's a little bit of blast going. There's some magma bumping around in there, you know, and then I am going to bump exposure up a little bit. I'm at 1.3 seconds at f16 in this kind of post-afterglow. Still a little bit dark. Bumping it up, just the steaming crater. I'm just kind of trying to get that background exposure for the sky and the water, you know, and I'm finding myself at 2 seconds at f8. And then as it got a little darker, you know, I start ranging in. I start realizing that the eruptions are you know, these little spits of, you know, explosive debris getting blown out that's on fire with splashes of magma down there in the caldera. And so, you know, you want to have a little bit longer shutter speed. I wasn't perfectly focused for this ranging shot, but you want a little bit longer shutter speed to capture more of them in the frame. So I bumped up to f11 and took it to 15 seconds. And as it got a little bit darker, you can see here's 25 seconds. I noticed that the eruptions were lasting a little bit longer, so I want to capture, you know, all of those little sparks flying through the air. This is pretty much an unedited image, but you get an idea what's going on down in here. There's boats down on the water. These are blurred because of the time of the shot. They're getting in position to watch the volcano going off at sunset. You know, here's an image that I tripped the shutter and shut it right back down just because the eruption stopped. It was a real short one, so it was over, so I stopped. But you can see that, you know, at the volcano is plenty well exposed at about a second at f11. It's that background exposure that needs the extra time. And then I finally got the shot that I wanted. I had this big explosive eruption. I captured it for 13 seconds at f11, and there was the nice blue hour going on. I was able to pull shadow detail out. You know, we've got a ton of magma swirling around in the chamber, all these crazy little sparks and arcs of debris getting ejected that's on fire. You know, these are like new rocks being formed. There's the boats down below with the tourists having dinner cruises to watch the volcano. Yeah, definitely the shot I was sort of after. Now, again, I really wanted to do a star photo, but being my first time up there, I didn't realize they really start cracking down on the groups. Everybody wants to get down. Next time, I'd like to take a group of photographers and have a little bit more leeway, organize it in advance, stay a little bit later, get some star action. But you know, I did get them to stay just long enough to have some stars in the blue hour, and I captured this one nice eruption very, very late while there were some stars. Oops, bouncing back here. And then I waited while it wasn't erupting, tilted up just a little bit, and got those first stars at blue hour so I could just blend those two together in post. And it was a pretty cool little eruption going on, and the boats were kind of stiller on the water, so there's less blurring of that. Pretty neat scene, actually. So again, I'd love to go back there when there's a little bit less haze, stay a little bit later, really get the stars, have it a little bit clearer. But then again, it may be tricky to get back there anytime in the near future. We're going to kind of have to wait and see. It was a pretty big eruption. It's happened several times over the last 100 years. Stromboli has been regularly erupting like you see in these images, gosh, for 100 years, and it's something that you can go up to and photograph just about any time. You know, if you're there in the evening, it's going to be going off every 15 or 20 minutes for, you know, 15 to 30 seconds. And it really is so cool looking down on it with the Mediterranean Ocean in the background. It's an experience. It's not a very difficult hike because, well, I mean, you're climbing, what, 2,800 feet, but it's a long, slow, switchbacking hike up in soft ground. And I think that probably with it having blown off its steam, if the seismologists say it's safe to go back, I would probably go. It's the same choice you make when you go swimming in the ocean. You know that there's the possibility that there's a shark there, but the odds are so low of anything actually happening to you. You're taking a much bigger risk jumping in your car and heading out on the freeway. But again, you know, it might be kind of a tricky workshop to get anybody to want to do that add-on. I might wind up doing it by myself. But you know, in the comments to this video, if you'd be game to do it, you know, let me know. I wonder what people's opinions are. Sometimes part of the joy of capturing an image is having that little bit of chance in there. You know, you never know exactly what's going to happen when you engage in some activities in the world. You know, I remember doing a big trip into the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and you know, it's never far from your mind that if something happens to you out there, you're very far from help. You know, a satellite phone call would still take a pilot several hours to get to you in a bush plane, and they may not be able to land. You know, a helicopter rescue would be extremely difficult. So those kinds of trips are special. You know, it's not something I want to do all the time, but some places are worth taking a little risk to get to. So I feel very bad for the people that live in Stromboli. It's a really small population that lives on that island, and I'm sure, you know, there have been fires. I know a lot of people have had to move. I'm sure everything's coated in ash. I even heard one of the news reports I read said that there was enough ash ejected into the atmosphere that it's affecting the reflectivity of solar radiation hitting the Earth. So it's actually going to have a little bit of a cooling effect like Mount Pinatubo did in the Philippines. So we might get a little bit of relief from some global warming with some cooling from this volcano. But again, it's a spectacular spot. I personally can't wait to get back and photograph it. It's just one of those special places that sticks out in my mind, and I'd love to take a group of people. So with that kind of behind the scenes thought, you know, it's really similar to photographing fireworks, but it's Mother Nature's fireworks. So it's also kind of fitting that this whole thing went off around fireworks season. So I have a couple of questions that came in through the YouTube comments, and I love this series of videos being super conversational and a back and forth. So feel free, leave those questions. You can email me privately too. I'm easy to get a hold of, and I respond as quickly as I can. I've been out van camping with my family on the Columbia River and kiteboarding the last 5 or 6 days, so I'm super behind on communications, but I'm catching up fast over this week. So I need a little bit of a break, and it was fun being out with the kids and the fam, and I was able to do some more testing with Nikon's mirrorless autofocus system with some kiteboarding action, and was really actually impressed with that new firmware update. But let me jump to the questions. My first question is from Yongo. And he says, great channel and contents, very practical and informative. You're a good teacher. I'm learning a lot. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. A different topic, broad question. I recently got asked to shoot an architectural video and found it hard when it comes to lens selection. I want to have very sharp and crisp edges, but avoid those skewed images and curved vertical and horizontal lines. But it's been really hard to keep them straight, and the edges seem to be a bit blurrier than I hoped for. Any tips on architecture, videography, and also on choosing the right lens? Zoom, prime, how other photographers achieve those straight lines. I'm using a full-frame mirrorless camera. Architecture is an interesting beast. It's very, very precise. And anytime that you're shooting something off-center with a wide-angle lens, or tilted up or tilted down, you're going to enhance distortion, and that's going to be extremely difficult to fix in video. In stills, when we have some distortion, there's a lot we can do with warp and transform tools, and there's a lot of automatic lens corrections that actually eliminate much of the distortion that wide-angle lenses use. And typically in architecture, when you've got a big space that you want to photograph, or you're up close to a building, you're going to need to be working with wider angle lenses, which have a lot more distortion, particularly on the edges. So, some advice I have, one is to photograph panoramas with lots of overlap. I talk about that in my advanced panorama course, which is available on my website. If you go to hudsonhenry.com, go through the training, I offer a full comprehensive video course on doing advanced panoramas. And I've had really good luck in big architectural spaces by capturing a panorama much wider than what I actually want and making the center of the image the part that I want, and then cropping into that, you'll get much straighter lines and less distortion. I think working with primes tends to be, unless you have the money to buy a really high-end ultra wide-angle lens. The Nikon 14-24 is really nice in those situations. The Sigma has some great ultra wides. The key to working with a rectilinear ultra wide, and by rectilinear I mean that it's not a fisheye. It doesn't have that super rounded distortion out at the edges. The key is really getting level and being square to your subject. So if you're shooting a building from one side looking off to the right, well, the side that's closest to you is going to appear large, and then it's going to step down and look small as it moves towards the part that's further away from you, just by matter of distance. You have to get sort of squared up on that wall if you want it to look square. Same thing's true if you're tilted up. The top of the building is going to have a lot of sort of trapezoidal. It's just gonna shift in and look more like a pyramid than a straight line. If you get level while you're looking at it, then the lines stay much straighter. You'll still have some distance compression where those lines are going to look like they're coming together more at the top, but it can be really alleviated by just keeping yourself as level as you can. So I guess one key is to go with as wide an angle as you can, and then potentially crop in if possible, because those edges are going to be the most distorted part. And if you can't afford the very, very best of ultra wide angled zooms, then an ultra wide angle prime is going to perform better than a cheaper ultra wide zoom. So hope that helps a little bit. The big key again is just staying square to your subject and not doing big aggressive tilts. And with the videography, it's going to be tricky to keep lines straight. You're just going to have to get a little creative with it. It's going to take practice, practice, practice. And you know, another thing, like you said, looking at other people's work and wondering how they did that. Even contact someone who's done some work that you really like of architectural videography. They may be working with lenses that are just outside the reach, though. Okay, so on to Doug Mitchell says, awesome shots, Hudson. He's talking about the Bandon Coast workshop and the video that I did about inundating the Z6 or the Z7 with salt water. About the Z6 and salt water and salt air, I just got back from the Caymans and was shooting from the back of a big catamaran that a friend pilots. Not a drop of water hit my Z6 or Nikon D850 or my lenses. Do you think I should send the bodies and lenses into Nikon for a cleaning? I use my Nikon 24-70 2.8, 70-200 2.8 f-mount lenses. Anytime I'm around the beaches, saltwater, I get nervous. When I've been sprayed, I have sent in bodies. This time, I don't think I need to. What would you do? Well, I would definitely not send them in. I've actually never sent bodies in just because I've been around salt water. Even if I get some salt water on them, I've not sent my Z7 in despite having a wave totally inundate me with it. The key to me is getting fresh water, rinsing that thing off as fast as possible. It's weather sealed. You've paid for a pro level weather sealed body and lens. Get fresh water on it as fast as you can. If you're out in a situation like you're talking about, Doug, and you're just worried about the salt air, I think a moist towel. You get a towel nice and wet and just wipe your whole body down. Wipe everything but the glass. And then take a Zeiss wipe and hit your elements and your viewfinder and the back LCD and the top panel, and then just buff those things off with a perfectly clean, fresh out of the bag microfiber cloth. You know, and I've said it before, I tend to take my microfiber cloths, run them through the washing machine and the dryer, and I've got Ziploc bags in the laundry room, and they just go straight into a sandwich bag and zip. And if a Ziploc bag, if a lens cleaning cloth is in a Ziploc bag in my camera bag, then it's clean. When I'm done, when I feel like it's getting dirty, it just goes loose in the camera bag, and then they go straight into the laundry when I get home. All right, hope that helps. I hope everybody enjoyed. If you think you'd still go to Stromboli, vote yes in the comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm crazy for wanting to go back after such a big eruption. Personally, I think maybe it blew off the steam, and it's probably safer to go than it has been for a while in the next couple of years. But we'll see what the seismologists say. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.